The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by TechTown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. TechTown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. TechTown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. TechTown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey, the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit. It is time for the week that was. And what a week we are having right now. Joining me, as usual, my friend Nancy Derringer. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
Alan Lengel, editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit, with us once again. And attorney Steve Fishman here. We just like having him here because he's a fun guest to have.
He's such a pleasure.
Great
Thanks for
talker.
coming back.
To
We
sit
appreciate
with
it very
Langwell
much.
And listen to that goofy song he was playing before. What could be better?
Well,
You're lucky
and
you
that
guys
goofy
weren't
song,
listening to
that goofy song that
The
Steve Fishman had
REM.
never heard before was REM's "It's the End of the World as We Know It," which is perhaps a fitting song because certainly we are entering uncharted territory right now as a result of the coronavirus. We just had the announcement last night by Governor Whitmer that all these schools will be closed until, I believe, April 6th is the date. That's throwing a number of people I know into a tizzy because that's a couple of weeks worth of childcare you got to figure out and everything else.
Oh, it's going to be bad.
A lot of people working from home, whether they feel bad or not, just nobody knows exactly what to do. And part of the reason that nobody knows exactly what to do is the guidance we have been getting from the top has been less than stellar. And this is how I'm going to open this. We're all trying to get information about coronavirus, how we should behave. Who are you actually paying attention to on this one right now? Who are you believing? Who wants to start that one?
I mean, the problem is we've had a president for the last almost 4 years now who has been a serial liar. And so now it's so hard for him to step up and have any credibility. And he's making statements. He's doing PR on stuff that it's slipping away from him, and I think he's starting to realize it, and he's stepping back a little bit.
He's the boy who cried fake news.
My
Yes.
understanding is he's having a press conference today at 3 o'clock now.
I can't imagine.
Now, if he
can't
just
either.
does like one of his little statement things and says, here's where we stand, and then walks without taking questions, fine. But if he's up there taking questions, this is just going to be a cluster because
Right.
we saw what happened when he was working with scripted remarks the other night. The market dropped 2,000 points in one day. They had to clarify his statements immediately after he gave the speech because he winged it.
Ad-libbed.
He ad-libbed a
on
teleprompter
a
speech.
10-minute prompter speech, which is unbelievable. And apparently they were still working on a draft up to 30 minutes before he actually,
And
spoke.
the authors of the draft, none other than Jared Kushner and the lovely or talented Stephen Miller.
See, Kyle.
Can you imagine
May his-
letting those two guys write a speech that you're going to use to address not just the nation but the world?
You know what?
Yeah.
The interesting thing, I was speaking to a medical director yesterday from Oakland County, and I said, this was before they announced more people had in the state, and I said, there's only 2 people in the state. I said, it's got to be higher. I said, my guess is the reason we only have 2 is because there hasn't been testing. And he said,
Bingo.
I agree. He says you have to assume there are a lot more
Well-
out there. And I think that's what's happened with Trump. By not testing, the numbers remain low. And now we're going to see real numbers.
Well, here's what gave me pause the other day when they had a map up on CNN of the states that didn't have any reported cases of coronavirus.
Right.
The states that were on the map were Michigan, and the company for Michigan on that map was West Virginia, Mississippi,
Ooh.
Alabama,
Ooh.
and a couple of states out west that don't have any people. So I'm thinking, is this the company we're keeping now?
I think
I mean,
so.
so the Mississippi thing,
Man,
maybe
when-
it's true because you cut back on enough services, you cut back on enough stuff. There's no testing kits available. Guess what? This is not the company that I want to keep as a resident of this state. No offense down south, but you have earned this reputation in many instances.
Meanwhile, Indiana is like, whoa.
Ohio, too. Ohio's like, check us out. We got thousands of cases.
So the answer to your question is who do you listen to? I know
Yeah.
who I'm listening to. I'm listening to scientists,
Yep.
medical professionals, and particularly a guy who I said in
Anthony
the gym this
Fauci.
morning, deserves a Nobel Prize, Anthony Fauci, because he has the impossible task of telling the truth to all of us while at the same time trying to buffoon the guy who's a buffoon into not realizing that he's contradicting everything that the buffoon says. The second thing that I think deserves mention is that all of these governors and mayors, these are the people who are stepping up.
You bet.
It's the local people. Gretchen Whitmer is doing what I think is a fantastic job, and she may be going further than her authority allows, ordering the closing, for instance, of Catholic schools. I'm not so sure the governor can do that with private schools. But the point being, we're forced, all of us as a nation, to rely on our local officials because you're getting absolutely nothing, not just from the President of the United States, but from the federal government because he refused to allow anybody to do anything. He and his cohort, Mr. Pence.
There's a story this morning in the Washington Post that a lot of sick people have not been able to be tested, even though their doctors have recommended that they be tested.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of cases that are just being dismissed as flu-like symptoms, virals. It's dangerous, and you really, when we talk about the hoax, when Trump came out and said this is just a hoax, I mean the hoax is Trump.
Yes. Duh. There was a great book that was published last year called The Fifth Risk. It's one of those Michael Lewis books, the guy who wrote The Big Short, and you know.
Sure.
And it's about what is lost in the federal government when an administration like Trump's essentially tries to starve it to death, and which is what they've been doing. There's all these unfilled jobs. Important professional positions have been going to political flunkies who are hired because, they express loyalty. And he concentrated on the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Energy, which is understandable. I mean, food and nuclear power.
Right.
But this is, I think, what's happening with the CDC. Well, not the CDC, that's an NGO. But with the health infrastructure at the federal level is a perfect example of this. These people, they have no clue what they're talking about. And did you see the Surgeon General of the United States of America last weekend claiming that Donald Trump, boy, the president is healthier than I am. This is a guy who's like 42, looks like he works out every 15 minutes, and he's like, oh, he gets less sleep than I do, and he's healthier than I am. It's like that is terrifying. The idea that every single pronouncement has to be prefaced with this, like, dear leader,
it's fascism.
Kowtowing is insane.
It's just more fascism, and I mean, it's really gelled.
Yes.
And people are falling in. I mean, he did have people before who were able to, push up against him, and now he's just got all yes people, and it's really a dangerous
terrifying.
situation.
But here's something that really, crystallized for me what I've always thought about this president, that the only thing he cares about is whether or not he looks good at any given time. And his response to this has always been to downplay what's going on, to minimize what the real truth was about how potentially dangerous this could be and how widespread it could be, to sit there and say, remember, at one time he was saying it was a Democratic hoax.
Right.
But then he comes out in his speech the other night and says, it's time to put partisan politics aside and work for the American people. His first tweet today says this: Sleepy Joe Biden was in charge of the H1N1 swine flu epidemic, which killed thousands of people. The response was one of the worst on record. Our response is one of the best, with fast action of border closings and a 78% approval rating, the highest on record. His was lowest.
It's 25th Amendment time, and
I mean, 'cause that's just insane. First of all, here's something that he doesn't mention in there. President Obama declared a national emergency in the H1N1
right.
because he wasn't afraid to tell people the truth about what was coming.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm sorry, if you do not level with people, you are going to be severely punished for this. And if you look at where people are and what we were seeing at the polls this week and some of the people who are coming out to vote specifically against Donald Trump, he is in deep, deep trouble.
Well,
and he just doesn't get the fact that this is going to be his downfall. His one thing he could complain about or brag about was the stock market. 85% of the gains under this administration have been wiped out in the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He's got nothing to stand on. The emperor has never had any clothes, and now he's just uglier naked than he was before.
I think what the distinction here is that nobody's blaming Trump for the actual virus.
Of course
They're
not.
just blaming the response.
He's blaming China.
Right.
Yeah, the foreign virus.
Foreign virus.
He's blaming somebody. And I see there were 3,433 deaths in the U.S. From the flu pandemic in 2009. And, I mean, It's not. Nobody's saying, Trump, this is your fault, but they are looking at how it's been handled and how
Right.
he's been so naive and trying to cover up and trying to BS people, and you can't BS numbers.
Right.
But don't you think part of it is because he's incapable of dealing with facts and figures? He has to have an enemy to make any kind of talking about statements. And he doesn't have an enemy other than the flu virus, which is really kind of immune, if I don't mind me using that word,
Sleepy Joe.
to his criticism. So
Right.
he's incapable. He couldn't sit and have a conversation about anything that has to do with facts because he's never bothered to trouble himself with facts. And without an enemy to blame something, and that's why he comes across, I think, as so incoherent.
But the only concrete steps he's taken to deal with this have dealt with the economy, pushing the Fed to make an interest rate cut, pushing legislators to maybe put through a payroll tax cut. It's all about the economy, not about the public health. I don't hear him talking about getting more testing kits.
No.
I don't talk. This is a guy who's potentially been exposed and said, well, I'm not going to get tested.
I don't believe that for a minute. I believe both of them were tested.
You think so?
Absolutely. Two old fat guys who never ever exercise. Those guys, they probably have high blood pressure and all the rest of the stuff. They're the classic targets of this virus. And a germaphobe. And plus, he's a coward. You don't really think he's got the balls to say, oh, I shook hands, so what? That guy could, he's a coward. He's been proven over and over again. His bone spurs prove it right from the beginning.
Well,
Okay?
and now this payroll tax cut idea, they actually floated out the idea. They're lowering it to 0% for a short period of time, but then said, we may make that permanent. I'm like,
How can you
how
do
do you do that without gutting Social Security
Right.
and Medicare?
Medicaid.
You can't. You can't. I mean, unless your goal is to basically destroy that program,
Well-
you can't make that permanent. This is how we pay for things like Social
I
Security
guarantee
and
it
Medicare.
never crossed his mind.
And it
You're assuming, not just the criminal mind part, you're assuming that the man knows something.
Right.
He doesn't know that until somebody tells him.
Well,
that.
he went to Pearl Harbor and he turned to somebody and said, "Well,
What's the
What's
port
the
down
big
here?
deal?
It's the Arizona. He's at the USS Arizona.
Yeah.
What's the big deal here at Pearl
Right,
Harbor? I mean,
yeah.
he doesn't know anything.
I think he's I think he's a brilliant man in terms of manipulation, understanding how to manipulate people. I think he's got ADD, so I think he does not retain much, and I don't think he cares to retain much. But he's got his genius is very narrow, very myopic.
It's a criminal genius. That's
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
is. Manipulating people. That's what criminals do.
He's talked about this before. We should put together like Fishman's greatest hits on this subject. But the other thing about the payroll tax is he's forgetting how many people aren't going to be getting checks at all. Who are? It's like it's one thing to say, okay, we're gonna people who are on salary, but an awful lot of people are on hourly wages, and they're not going to. Or gig,
It's just the
gig
little
workers.
people, Nancy.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
seriously, this is not something he concerns himself with. But if we look at just the closures that are going on around our community right now, the museums are closing,
Synagogues,
schools are
churches.
closing, churches not having services. I mean, there are people who have their home, and again, if you're hourly, you don't get paid just there. I mean,
Right.
paid time off. If you could guarantee that, that's something that the Democrats want to do. Lamar Alexander in the Senate already put the kibosh on that. We'll see if maybe they push it through and actually get the Senate to take this up.
Are we talking about paid sick leave?
Paid sick leave.
Yeah.
Well, the Democrats have a package of things
three things.
to help do this, and it needs serious consideration.
Paid sick leave, free testing.
Yep.
I can't remember the third thing.
Well, and the fact that it took the badgering, like 15 minutes of badgering from one representative to actually get them to say, okay, I guess maybe we'll make the testing free.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
It
Did
is.
you guys read the editorial yesterday in the New York Times? First one, Farad Manjo. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right. I thought it was one of the finest editorials that talked about, and this is the kind of thing you'd like to ask some of these Republican-leaning people. It said, in a pandemic, this is Denmark. Everybody is a socialist when it comes to a pandemic.
Sure.
Why? Because everyone figures the government will step in and save your butt. These guys never think about that in 2016 when they're cutting the budget for the CDC, cutting the budget for anybody that has
Eliminating
anything
the
to do.
pandemic board,
Yeah, exactly. But all of a sudden, when a crisis hits, everyone is a socialist from Denmark.
Sure.
And it's a great column. It really
And
is.
it's actually interesting on Facebook. I've seen some Republicans who are criticizing Trump's response, and I think when it comes
very
down,
brave.
well, yeah, but I think when it comes down
Cowards.
to something like this, Democrat or Republican, whoever's in charge is responsible, and I don't think it is really so much, a party thing. I think it's just people are scared and they want action. I mean, it's so freaky. Just even watching last night, Stephen Colbert. With no audience. I mean, he had some, I think, staff people in the audience and stuff
To
like
laugh
that.
at him?
But it just seems sort of
The jokes.
surreal, like something
I
has
know.
very horrible happened. I mean, all the sports events. I mean, these are our society is really shutting down, which is in some ways, particularly for the economy, is super dangerous if it's short term. If it's long term, if it goes on for 9 months, we're going to see some serious fallout.
At the same
We're
time,
going
though,
to see fallout anyway.
you've got them canceling all kinds of events around here. Again, the NCAA tournament is gone. We of course, the Red Wings and Pistons seasons are effectively over.
Not
The
so
league's
horrible.
canceled. It's fine for them.
The
Opening day's
upside
gonna
of
be
it
pushed
all.
back more than likely, which is fine because I didn't want to go to opening day on March 28th anyway, or whatever day it was supposed
March
to be.
30th, I think.
But is there something potentially positive that comes out of this, Steve Fishman, about all these sporting events being canceled?
I think that there are two things I thought of when I was in the gym this morning. I'm looking at ESPN 24 hours a day, babbling on about nonsense, where they literally, when all the sports are playing, every 15 minutes they have to repeat, this guy threw it in from half court or whatever. That's how little there really is to talk about. What exactly are they going to do for 24 hours a day for the next month, let's say, other than show old films of Jordan playing against Isaiah Thomas?
That's what I do.
But more than that, if there's a silver lining in this dark cloud, for the month of March, maybe people will read books or have conversations with each other or find other things to do. The role that sports has now started to play, and this has nothing to do with people who actually played the game. The normal person in this day and age, particularly men, they spend a lot of their time watching this crap on ESPN, talking about it, gambling on it, whatever. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how people are going to react without any sports on television.
What about the sports bars? What if people go there and watch the soap operas?
Or the sports books that just opened up at the two
That's
casinos.
only in Detroit.
They
Only in
launch.
Detroit.
They launch here, and all of a sudden, every game you can bet on has been canceled.
Right.
So just like they opened just in time, they were opening in time for the
think of
Big Ten
that.
tournament and March Madness is what they
Right.
really were trying to take advantage of, and boom.
But
gone.
I think it's going to be fascinating. I think on an individual basis for people, someone like me, the Big Ten tournament, of course, I'm interested in. Michigan's playing, NCAA tournament, I'm interested in. I'm not a junkie who's going to sit and watch ESPN, but I like the ball games. I like to read the write-ups of the ball games. And it'll just be fascinating to see what people do. Maybe they'll remember what their wife's first name is. Oh, those kids. I have three.
I was going to say,
I had two kids all this time. Where'd this
you
third
come
one
from?
come from?
I was going to say, actually go to a restaurant, but they're not going to do that either. It's funny. I walked home yesterday down Woodward Avenue, and I went by the the Mexican restaurant
Bakersfield.
Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And I assumed it would be empty. It was packed.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of people.
We're going.
doing
My kids and I are going out to dinner. We've been to dinner Wednesday. The restaurants are down, but
Right.
where we go, it's a lot of older people. And older people, they keep telling us the elderly, as they call us. Not you, just me. I think I'm the only elder person.
No, I
They
think
make
we're
it
all
sound
elder.
like if you're elderly, which is defined, by the way, we looked it up. All us old people in the gym, 65 or over,
Okay.
is termed elderly. Whether you
That's
feel
elderly?
it, that's what they say.
Wow.
See, I'm only
Okay.
ARP eligible at this point.
Yeah.
so.
So we got two elderlies and two elderly in the penumbra elderly.
Yeah,
oh,
One
really?
that's
penumbra
right.
Nice
elderly.
of you to put yourself in that.
I'm not 65
No,
yet.
we claim you have to be over 70 because we want to be an exclusive group. We're
Of
all over
course.
70.
Exactly.
My friends and I and the people in the gym.
Yeah.
So we don't want you 65-year-old
Okay.
anyway. But if you guys want to go run wind sprints and see who can win, we'll do that.
Oh, you'd kick my butt all day long on that. I guarantee you. I'm one of the slowest people ever born, which is why my athletic career never really made it past the 8th grade.
Bad knees.
All right, so I do think some of the actions that have been taken have been very responsible. I like what's taking place on a state level, local level. We're getting some good information. For instance, we realized that the governor was having press conferences with all these reporters in there. Now it's pool reporting. So there's only a couple of people in there, so they can feed it to everybody else who gets it remotely. I think there's going to be a real quick lesson for a lot of school districts on how to remote instruct.
Ugh.
Because online learning is not the same as being in a classroom situation.
really isn't.
It's going to be difficult. And I feel bad for kids who are seniors in high school who are losing these last couple of months.
Well, they don't
possibly.
feel bad, I guarantee you. I don't think
unless-
there's a kid who feels bad. They're looking forward to we can play a little more ball. We can
Unless-
sit-
Unless
I
they're
can't
taking the
imagine
AP
that
test.
tell me schools canceled for 5 weeks that I would be bummed out.
No, probably
Well,
not. Maybe I'm
you
forgetting what
wouldn't.
it was like to be a kid. But,
But
you
I
know.
remember, I remember when my daughter was like, a striving high school student and was taking these AP classes. And you're already held back by the fact that Michigan won't start, because those tests are given the same day for everybody in the country. It's in May. And Michigan is already held back by the fact that we can't start school until the day after Labor Day. So these southern districts, in Alabama and Georgia, where they can start early, and they do. They start like usually the second week in August, which is crazy. They're way ahead. So if you falter in some of those curricula, you are really screwed.
Very true. All right, let's move on because this is going to be dominating our discussion for a long time. The president now says that this 3:00 press conference is going to be to announce a declaration of a national emergency to speed the virus response, which means that the National Guard can be deployed. There's a few other things that can be deployed in that situation. So the National Guard will be able to help out with getting supplies from place to place and logistical stuff. That's a big deal.
So the first question from the reporter should be really simple. Where you been?
We'll see.
That's a great speech. Those
Yeah.
are all great ideas. Where have you been?
Yeah.
It's been 2 months,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And you've sat there and you've denied and you've deflected. You blamed it on the Chinese. You blame it on everybody other than the Brits, of course, because you and Boris Johnson have to hold hands when you go to the bathroom. Where have you been?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, the theme that we've heard from a lot of Trump supporters from the very beginning and year after year is like, hey, all I know is my 401k is doing great.
Oh yeah.
I
So-
haven't looked.
Yeah,
I can't
I'm
look at
afraid.
it.
I'm afraid to look, but
looked
it's
2 days
but it's
ago.
interesting.
It's
What's
terrible.
left for this guy if the 401k, if the economy
well,
is
That's what that was the point I made at the
But yeah,
beginning of the show
but
today.
there's one thing that we have to remember, and I thought about this today too, because they have all the different TVs, and on one TV, of course, usually way away from us because we turn it off, is Fox News. And if you think about it, when they're shutting things down, they should seriously consider shutting down Fox News because they've poisoned however many people that only get their news from there for the past 2 months into believing. When you see these polls, only 35% or whatever it was of Republicans think it's a real threat, and 72% of and there's a reason for that because they're listening to Hannity and these people on Fox News and Limbaugh, and they don't get any facts. They get no truth.
It's a propaganda network. I
But
think we
I'm
can-
saying in this instance,
Yeah.
it's dangerous.
Yeah, I
Because
would
when
say
you have
that.
people who are going around and socializing and shaking hands and hugging on people, knowing absolutely nothing, believing it's a Democratic hoax that somehow was done just because impeachment didn't work, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well.
Anyway,
Well, there is potentially a light at the end of the tunnel. We have an election coming up this year. The primaries
had
have
an
begun.
I was telling Craig that the election was on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And
Right,
it
that was 3 days ago.
Yep.
3 years
And it
ago.
feels like it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like
But Joe Biden had a good day.
very good.
He had a good week.
the
Good 2
primaries.
weeks.
Yeah.
Not even 2 weeks. But, I mean, he had a great primary here in Michigan. He won every county in the state, which surprised me a little bit that he would win every county. I thought maybe Washington might go for Bernie, but
It's interesting. Chad Selweski, who did a column for us, was basically saying that he thinks that the Bernie victory in 2016 was a fluke, that people were more voting against Hillary than they were for Bernie. And I think there's no question Bernie has a core of supporters there.
And
so
I think this landslide for Biden is the Democratic voters saying, can we just fast forward to November? It's like this is the guy that's got the best chance. Let's just get this over with.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if we can just figure out a way, I read a great column in the New York Times.
Another
that
New
the
York
people
Times
close
column.
to him have been trying to limit the amount of conversation he has, particularly with the press, the amount of talking. If we can keep
Right.
him pretty much mute
Biden?
between
Okay.
between now in November.
Right, the
I think
last-
we got a decent
He gave a
chance.
nice address on Tuesday night. I thought he did a very good job with that address. He sounded as coherent as I've heard him in a long time.
Yep.
He gave a nice response the other day to the coronavirus, just yesterday. And I think the headline I saw in the Washington Post was, Biden gives strangely coherent address.
Well, but it's an address.
compared to what we're used to,
But
something like
but
that. It was
that's
great.
a lot different than standing
Oh,
there
no.
and talking.
An
I-
and people
unusually
asking
presidential
questions.
address. I think is what it was.
I think what you see though is a much more confident Joe Biden. I mean, look, the guy has gotten bludgeoned through the whole the Burisma
Right.
investigation, the impeachment thing, his son, and then the Iowa caucus, the New Hampshire primary, Nevada. I mean, he was getting pummeled, and I think he lost his mojo of what he has.
What mojo he could be said
and
to
so
have
now
had.
you're seeing a lot more confident Joe Biden come back.
Well,
you know.
clearly they are very, very worried about Joe Biden on the Republican side, because one of the things that Don Jr. put out on
there's a good
Twitter
source.
was, remember, the Democrats were pushing impeachment while coronavirus spread. So it's the Democrats' fault that
Oh,
the
my
administration
gosh.
didn't respond. So
Right.
I'm saying, so you're saying you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Multitasking is a big part of the president's
don't
job.
even. I mean, you don't even respond to somebody like Don. Don Jr. is the dumbest son, and his job is to
I
talk
think
to
Eric
the
maybe
dumbest.
there's
I don't know. Eric at least had the sense not to become Don Jr. you know.
right, true.
But he's like his job is to talk to the dumbest people in the base,
Just-
with his plastic surgery victim girlfriend.
And just
everything
keep in mind when you're talking
Oh,
about the
you
base.
catty.
Keep in mind when you're talking about fake news in the base.
else. Yeah.
Think about this: the sale of Corona beer, the sales went down 38%.
Yes.
because some
Right.
people obviously believed that somehow the virus came from Corona beer.
That
When
Corona-
people ask me, how is it possible that a career criminal like Donald Trump could get elected president, I cite them to that. The same people who think that Corona beer caused the virus figured it's okay to vote for him.
Well,
So,
the last time I had 10 or 12 of them suckers, I was feeling pretty sick myself, so I'm not surprised.
38%.
Yeah, there you go.
Jesus.
So, one bit of good news here. A research center in Israel is going to announce that it has developed a coronavirus vaccine.
I'm going to tell you all about that.
It's going to take some testing.
I'm going to tell you all about that.
Go ahead.
3 weeks ago, I read an article. The name of it's called Migal is the name of the company, and it's the Gilead Science Institute, I think. And they had been the key to it is they do this stuff all the time, and the virus that they were working on happens to have a lot of similar strains to this COVID-19, whatever.
Right.
So they were optimistic that they would have their vaccine done. In Israel, it's a 90-day period,
Yeah.
which would be a lot less than 12 to 18 months. But Lengel and I, we hate to tell you guys this, and don't you take this too seriously, because I had convinced the people in the gym that this was true. If the Israelis develop it, we're
Jews
only
get it
giving it to
first.
the Jews. So when I said this in the gym, there was a couple of Jews who, of course, chuckled like Lengel did, and the Gentiles kind of went, and I kept a straight face. And they said, well, how will you know? How will they know which ones are the Jews? I said the same way Hitler knew which ones to march off to the concentration camps, and that shut him up pretty good. But no, that's not true. We're going to give it to everybody if the
Shabbat
Israelis
shalom,
come up
my
They're going to give
brother.
it to everybody, including the people who are boycotting Israeli products.
That's right.
Yeah,
Everybody
well,
can have it.
it's amazing. Those things sort of go away.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Yeah, I was talking to the doctor, the medical director, and he was saying that the strain that the Israelis have been working on is similar, I think, to the bird flu or stuff like that. Stuff that they've
And
been
to this particular
yeah, and
virus.
to this one.
So
So,
we'll
it's
see.
not that big of a leap to
I think it would
develop
be
that.
It would be ironic if the Israelis come up with this after all the crap that they take. You know?
Right.
That's hilarious.
So,
All right. So, Schmuck of the Week. We got to think about
I
this
have
for
a
just a second.
I have a nomination.
Okay.
Oakland County Judge Leo Bowman.
absolutely.
Here's a guy who
guy.
there was a civil case. There was it's really a case about a wife. It was about a divorce. She felt like her husband might have been hiding assets. So one of the defendants in the case is the husband's brother, and so he was called into court for a criminal contempt hearing because the judge says that he violated one of the judge's orders. So The hearing was set for 8:30 in the morning. At 4:15 or something like that, the guy writes his attorneys and says, I'm sick. I've got 103 fever. I can't lift my head. They get to court at 8:30 in the morning. The judge says, I don't care. Get him here at 11 o'clock. So they can't get a hold of him. Finally, at 2:30, they get a hold of him. He's at the pharmacy picking up. He's already got a doctor's note saying he has bacterial pneumonia, which is contagious, at least until you start taking the antibiotics. And at 2:30, the judge says, I'll wait till 3. And at that point, I'm going to issue an arrest warrant for him. So the guy shows up at 3:04 p.m., and the judge throws him. The guy is vomiting.
He's puking
He's
in
on
a
his knees.
wastebasket.
Yeah, he's on his knees.
In the
While he's in front of
courtroom.
the judge.
In the courtroom,
In the courtroom.
twice
5
vomiting,
days.
and then he sends him off. So one, he contaminated the courthouse. 2, he contaminates the jail. And this judge,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Schmuck of the week.
Schmuck.
That's
of the week.
that's a good one.
That's a good
You
one.
got one, Nancy?
Jared Kushner.
Kushner?
Yeah, I'm just going to go with Jared
Kush.
Kushner. Just with a
He's
shotgun
supposed to be figuring
blast of
everything
reasons.
out. We have
Oh,
yet
yeah.
to hear any complete plans from
Exactly.
Mr. Kushner.
And I've been told that apparently the president has been holding off on making any declarations, which apparently it's going to change this afternoon, until Jared finishes his research.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Dr. Jared.
yeah, Dr. Jared Kushner. So I'll say Jared Kushner.
So should we say he went to Jared? Is that going to
Yeah,
be
he
our
went
new,
to
our new
Jared,
thing?
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Mine is because Donald Trump can't be it because
Yeah.
the trophy is named after him.
Of course.
So the schmuck of the week to me is Mick Mulvaney, who at the same CPAC conference, where thank God the guy shook hands with Ted Cruz, who had to self-quarantine. They should have had a video of him sitting in his little self-quarantine. But Mick Mulvaney, right before that came out, remember, said that it's all a Democratic hoax, blah, 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 blah,
Yep.
blah.
Yeah.
So that's my candidate. Although I have to say, I know Judge Bowman pretty well, and I get along with him really well. But reading that column and knowing it was Art Weiss, who was a lawyer, who's a really fine lawyer,
Right.
who talked
Yeah.
a lot to the reporter, he's a pretty good contender for this week, too.
Well, I've got mine, and it is Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida.
Oh, that guy.
So Matt Gaetz, to sort of mimic the coronavirus thing, shows up in Congress wearing a gas mask, then gets potentially exposed to it. So he self-quarantines, including sleeping in a Walmart parking lot one night, which I'm sitting there going, maybe that wasn't coronavirus, Matt. Maybe that was just corona, sleeping it off in a parking lot at
He does-
Walmart. You wouldn't be the only, it wouldn't be the
does
first
have a
time.
history, yeah.
Look, I don't make fun of that stuff
Well, that's-
because, you know, but at the same time,
That's a tough call.
he did test negative, but now he's complaining that the Democrats' plan might actually expand SNAP benefits for people during this time
God
when
forbid.
people are going to be, they're like, well, SNAP benefits, food stamps have nothing to do with this kind of thing. I'm
Well,
like,
God
wait,
forbid if he
you're
did.
self-quarantining, people are going to be home, they need supplies, and you're still going to go ahead with the SNAP benefits work requirements while everybody's off of work?
yeah, and can't work.
I'm sorry.
Right.
This
If you're
could be
opposing
a tie
this,
for
Yeah.
these two, I think. It could be a tie.
I'm telling you, it is tone deaf and stupid. And again, it is just completely minimizing the experience of a whole lot of people that work full time and still qualify for benefits.
Do we know who the
That's what's wrong with
CPAC
America.
patient zero was? The person who composed. I'm suspicious. I suspect it might have been a sex worker. Okay,
Ooh.
well, it's like look at all the. It's all men who were exposed, and it was all.
Oh, see, that's what happens when you sit in the bimbo chair.
Yeah.
So we got candidates. Do we want to take a vote on this, or is it just do we get a 4-way tie? Because
I
I think
think
we got
it's-
4 good ones this
Yeah.
week.
I think this could be a tie.
I
Yeah.
think what
I don't
we were
think-
seeing is a pandemic of schmucks.
Well,
Schmuck
at-
19.
if you think about it, though, when you have a trophy that's named after the biggest schmuck, it's pretty easy for people to come forward every week and
Right.
try to qualify for that trophy.
Yeah,
Very, very
exactly.
true. But okay, so we're you know what? We're gonna let you decide as you watch this. If you're watching, send me a message. Just leave it on the thread on either Deadline Detroit when we post the video a little later, or on this Facebook thread where we're doing it live, or send me an email to thecraigfolleyshow@gmail.com. Register your vote. So once again, we have Judge Bowman.
Judge Bowman.
We had
Mick Mulvaney.
Mick Mulvaney.
Jared Kushner.
and Matt Gates.
Okay.
Wow.
tough
That
one.
is a
Talk about a Mount Rushmore.
muckitude.
That's Mount Schmuckmore. Right there.
It should be one of America's great exports, schmucks.
There you go. We're doing our best right now. All right, we got to wrap it up. Thanks to Techtown Detroit and Samaritas for sponsoring this show each and every week. I do appreciate it very much. Thanks to our friend Michael Lucido for engineering the broadcast once again
Michael
today.
Lucido.
Thanks to Nancy Derringer and Alan Lengel of Deadline Detroit for being here. Thanks to our guest, Steve Fishman, as well. And thanks to all of you for watching, commenting, giving me the positive feedback. I know you guys like this segment. I appreciate it. The numbers are going in the right direction for this. And that's what we like. So if you like it, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Let your friends know we do this every Friday here on Facebook. And, of course, it's available as a podcast as well anywhere you get your podcasts. And that is basically anywhere you get podcasts.
Right.
So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
And drive home safely.
And wash your hands.
And wash your
Yeah, I
hands.
would say
Yeah.
wash your hands. Never mind the driving.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey, the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.